The opening scene, the moment everything changes. If you are over 40, you need to remember this exact number, 142. For a teenager, a blood glucose spike to 142 after a meal is barely a blip on the radar. But for an aging metabolic system, this number is a loud, early warning siren. It always starts with a routine, seemingly unimportant phone call from your doctor's office. A single sentence that immediately alters the trajectory of your health. Your routine blood work shows that you have crossed into the prediabetes range. Your fasting plasma glucose is 108, and your HbA1c has reached 6.1%. We need to monitor this closely now, because if we don't, you are on a direct path toward type 2 diabetes.
For a 48-year-old manager, a father, and a busy professional, this did not feel like simple medical information. It felt like a sudden, heavy blow. You ask yourself the questions that millions of people ask. How did I get here? I don't eat sugar all day. I don't drink sodas. How is my metabolism failing me? This was not caused by a single bad plate of food. This was the cumulative biological result of years of high-stress, sedentary work. The late-night emails, the poor sleep, the constant state of alarm, and the slow, unnoticed loss of metabolic flexibility. Introducing the challenge, 7 days to change your destiny. Instead of giving in to panic or starting a miserable, highly restrictive diet that is destined to fail, he decided to turn his own body into a living laboratory. He strapped a continuous glucose monitor to his arm and made a firm commitment. Give me 7 days, and I will lower my fasting glucose by 25 points. What those 7 days revealed was not just a drop on a graph, but a complete reprogramming of his biology. He is a 48-year-old professional who represents the modern metabolic crisis, a person with a demanding sedentary job, chronically elevated stress levels, inconsistent sleep patterns, and a metabolic system that was rapidly losing its ability to process energy. The goal was specific: to reset the metabolic machinery in exactly 7 days, without pharmaceuticals, without extreme calorie deprivation, and without sacrificing productivity. Introducing the character, the case study of a busy 40-plus professional. Our subject represents millions of busy professionals worldwide, sitting at a desk for 9 hours, relying on coffee to survive the afternoon brain fog, experiencing sudden, intense cravings by 4 p.m., and sleeping barely 6 hours a night. Over the years, he developed visceral fat around his midsection, persistent fatigue, and a body that no longer responded to insulin efficiently. He would start his day with 2 cups of coffee, usually with sugar or creamer. For lunch, he ate whatever was quick and convenient. By late afternoon, his cognitive energy would crash, leading to sugar cravings. Dinner was eaten late, too close to bedtime, leading to poor sleep quality. This is the classic metabolic roller coaster. The initial tension, his body was no longer working like before. The underlying problem was not just the number 108 on his blood test. The real crisis was that his body was no longer managing metabolic signals. After 40, the biological buffer zone disappears. His glucose levels remained elevated for hours after a simple meal. His body did not respond to its own insulin, and his energy levels crashed dramatically throughout the day. His body composition was shifting: less muscle, more visceral fat, poorer glucose disposal, and a growing dependency on insulin. Announcing the route. This is a documentary, not a gimmick. This is not a weight loss gimmick, a diet trend, or an unrealistic promise. This is a scientific, step-by-step masterclass on how the human body processes energy after 40. Over the course of this documentary, we will show you exactly how he manipulated his biology to reverse years of metabolic decline. We will analyze the physics of muscle contraction, the chemistry of organic acids in the digestive tract, the hormonal cascade of cortisol, and the precise sequence of food ingestion. Entering day 1. Over the next 7 days, he will learn how to eat, how to move, how to sleep, and how to manage stress to reprogram his metabolism. What you will see is a practical, real-world protocol designed for a busy life. The baseline has been set. The sensor is active. And now, we enter day 1. Science of metabolic collapse after 40. Why you are no longer the same person after 40. If you could eat a large plate of pasta, a dessert, or a large pizza a few years ago and wake up the next morning without any issues, it did not mean your diet was healthy. It simply meant your body still had compensatory capacity. A body under 35 typically relies on 3 protective shields. 1. Higher muscle mass, a larger metabolic sink to absorb incoming glucose. 2. Younger mitochondria, highly efficient cellular engines that burn fuel cleanly. 3. Precise hormonal regulation, an optimal response of insulin, glucagon, and GLP-1. But after 40, these 3 shields begin to thin. It happens silently, slowly, and in a way that easily deceives you. You still go to work, you walk, you live your life, but your energy regulation system is no longer functioning the same way. And that is the core issue. Prediabetes is not a disease of numbers. It is a systemic collapse. The first domino, sarcopenia and the shrinking glucose sink. Let us break this down with biological precision. When you consume food, especially carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises. Your body must clear this glucose from the bloodstream immediately. The safest, most efficient destination for this glucose is your skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle acts as a massive metabolic reservoir. However, after 40, if you are not doing resistance training, if you are not consuming adequate protein, if you spend most of your day sitting, if your sleep is chronically compromised, this reservoir shrinks every single year. This means that the same meal that your body once easily managed now causes massive glucose spikes. This explains why a 48-year-old adult can experience a severe blood sugar spike 60 to 90 minutes after eating a seemingly healthy breakfast, like oatmeal with a banana or a simple sandwich. The biological reality is brutal. If glucose cannot enter the muscle, it remains in the bloodstream. And when it remains in the blood, the pancreas is forced to pump out more insulin. The second domino, insulin resistance. The key is there, but the lock is jammed. Insulin acts as a key. Its job is to unlock the cell doors so glucose can exit the bloodstream and enter the cells for energy. In a pre-diabetic state, however, we face a paradox. The pancreas is still producing insulin, often in excessive amounts, but the cells have become resistant to its signal. As a result, the pancreas is forced to work twice as hard, circulating insulin levels remain chronically high, and the body enters a destructive cycle. Elevated insulin, increased fat storage, worsened insulin resistance, even higher insulin levels. For adults over 40, especially those under chronic stress, this loop acts as a metabolic amplifier. You do not have to be severely overweight to experience this. The location of your fat storage matters much more than the number on the scale. The third domino, visceral fat, the active hormonal gland. Abdominal fat is not inert storage tissue. Visceral fat, the deep fat wrapped around your internal organs, becomes highly active after age 40. It behaves like an endocrine gland, continuously secreting inflammatory cytokines and signaling molecules that directly disrupt your metabolism. Visceral fat directly interferes with insulin signaling pathways, promotes chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation, lowers cellular insulin sensitivity, keeps the body in a constant state of metabolic defense. This means that even before you take your first bite of food in the morning, your hormonal environment is already primed for elevated blood sugar. This is why many people are confused when they cut calories but see no improvement in their glucose. The issue is not just the food input,
It is the internal hormonal environment.
The fourth domino, mitochondria, the slowing cellular engines. Think of your mitochondria as cellular furnaces. In your younger years, these furnaces possess high metabolic flexibility. They burn fat efficiently, they utilize glucose rapidly, and they recover quickly from occasional overeating. But after 40, particularly with a sedentary lifestyle, mitochondrial efficiency declines. Cellular fuel burning slows down. The body shifts its default state toward energy storage. Consequently, blood sugar takes much longer to return to baseline after a meal, and the brain, sensing a lack of cellular energy, triggers constant cravings. This leads to the classic pre-diabetic paradox. Your blood sugar is high, yet you feel completely exhausted. The fifth domino, cortisol, the silent morning glucose driver. Now we must look at the hidden driver that sabotages many busy professionals over 40, chronic stress. Cortisol is a survival hormone. Its primary job when the body senses stress is to ensure immediate energy availability by dunking glucose from the liver into the bloodstream. This explains why many individuals experience high fasting glucose readings in the morning, even if they ate a light dinner the night before or practiced fasting. Their bodies are stuck in a state of high alert. Sleep deprivation, chronic work pressure, and mental fatigue lead to elevated cortisol, which triggers hepatic glucose output, resulting in elevated morning fasting blood sugar.
The sixth domino, sleep deprivation, a single night of insufficient sleep. Sleep is not just passive rest, it is an active metabolic repair process. A single night of poor sleep significantly reduces acute insulin sensitivity, elevates hunger hormones, increasing ghrelin and suppressing leptin, triggers intense cravings for fast-acting carbohydrates, dysregulates glycemic control even if your food intake remains identical. This means you can eat the exact same meal, but if you are sleep-deprived, that meal will produce a far more damaging glucose spike than it would on a night of restful sleep. The continuous glucose monitor exposes this truth. Your metabolism does not just react to what you eat, it reacts to how you sleep. The bigger picture. Prediabetes is a pathway, not a point in time. At this stage of the journey, our 48-year-old subject realizes that the issue is not simply the number 108 on a lab report. The issue is an interconnected system of metabolic decline. Less muscle means less room to store glucose. More visceral fat means more inflammation and resistance. Slower mitochondria mean less energy burned. Higher cortisol means elevated morning glucose. Poor sleep means compromised insulin function. This creates a downward spiral. Prediabetes is a slippery slope that has been building for years. But the most critical insight is this. If your body was programmed into this state by incorrect signals, it can be programmed out of it using the correct biological signals, even in a short time frame. Transition. Why a 7-day reset actually works. You might ask, can you really change your biology in just 7 days? In 7 days, you will not lose 10 kilograms of fat, nor will you alter your genetics. However, you can make 3 highly measurable, clinically significant changes. 1. Flatten postprandial spikes. Keep your glucose peaks lower and shorter. 2. Reduce glycemic variability. Minimize the dramatic ups and downs throughout the day. 3. Lower fasting glucose. Address morning spikes by managing liver output, stress, and sleep. This is where our precise day-by-day protocol begins. This is not a story about a single number. It is the story of a system that has slowly drifted out of calibration after 40, and the precise biological levers we will use to recalibrate it. In the next part, we dive into the actual daily protocol,
the food sequence, the post-meal walking science, the sleep interventions, and how small adjustments can reverse years of metabolic decline.
The 7-day protocol, biological leverage. The strategy, a biological intervention, not just a diet. Many people believe that to correct blood sugar, they must eliminate bread, rice, and all carbohydrates entirely. But for a 48-year-old with a demanding schedule, an unsustainable, highly restrictive diet is a guaranteed failure. Our strategy was not focused on what to eat. It was focused on how to eat. We utilized 4 specific biological levers, a protocol designed to manage glucose levels without severe caloric deprivation. Over the 7 days, these were the interventions.
Days 1 and 2, building the protective shield. In the first 2 days, the primary goal was to flatten the peaks. We achieved this through food sequencing. Rule number 1, eat your vegetables and fiber first, protein and fat second, and carbohydrates last. When you consume fiber first, it creates a viscous, gelatinous mesh in your intestines that significantly slows down the absorption of glucose. This ensures that when the carbohydrates eventually reach your bloodstream, they do so at a much slower, more manageable rate. Rule number 2, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water before the main meal. The acetic acid in the vinegar signals your muscles to uptake glucose more rapidly, effectively increasing your insulin sensitivity in real time. By the end of day 2, we observed that post-lunch glucose spikes dropped from 140 to 120 without reducing the volume of food, just by changing the sequence and the metabolic signals.
Days 3 and 4, the muscle engines, the 10-minute rule. Slowing the intake was only half the battle. We needed to find a way to burn the glucose that had entered the system. Rule number 3, a 10-minute walk immediately following your main meal. The science here is precise. When your muscles contract, they trigger the movement of a protein called GLUT4 to the cell surface. This protein acts as a mechanical key, pulling glucose out of the blood and into the muscle cells, completely independent of insulin. On days 3 and 4, our subject discovered that a simple 10-minute walk through the office hallways or a nearby park reduced his post-meal glucose by 30 points compared to the days he remained sedentary at his desk. This was the raw power of mechanical muscle contraction.
Days 5 and 6, hormonal balance, managing cortisol and sleep. At this stage, our focus shifted from food to the metabolic environment. Why was his fasting glucose still elevated in the mornings? Because cortisol, the primary stress hormone, was signaling the liver to release glucose stores to the blood. Rule number 4, limiting the eating window and optimizing sleep. We ensured the last meal of the day was finished 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. This allowed insulin levels to drop overnight, creating a genuine opportunity for fat oxidation. Simultaneously, this improved his deep sleep quality, the single most effective treatment for insulin resistance. By days 5 and 6, the afternoon energy crash had vanished. Because his blood glucose remained stable throughout the day, his body no longer required the caffeine and sugar shock just to stay functional.
Day 7, assessment and conclusion. By the 7th day, the data from the continuous glucose monitor told the final story. Fasting glucose improved from 108 to 104, a 15% reduction. Post-meal spikes, a 30% reduction in peak height. Energy levels, consistent and stable. 7 days prior, he had entered this experiment with a reading of 108 and a fear of impending disease. He now understood that the problem was not a broken body. The problem was a set of incorrect signals. Through simple changes, food sequencing, the addition of acetic acid, post-meal muscle contraction, and sleep timing, he had recalibrated his system. He learned that after 40, the body no longer tolerates negligence, but it responds with miraculous precision to biological accuracy. Calibration. This reset was only the beginning. The fundamental question remains: how do we transform this 7-day experiment into a sustainable, lifelong habit?
without sacrificing a busy career or a demanding lifestyle.
The reset is over, but the body is just beginning. When a 48-year-old lowers fasting glucose dramatically in just 7 days, that is not a miracle. It is the recovery of metabolic responsiveness. It is the body reminding us that dysfunction is not always damage. Very often, it is a matter of poor signaling, bad timing, and repeated overload. But the most important truth comes after the first improvement. Real stability is not built in 7 days. It is built through small behaviors repeated long enough for the body to trust them. This final part is about turning a short intervention into a permanent operating system.
Principle 1. Keep the glucose peaks low. After the reset, the biggest risk is falling back into repeated spikes and crashes. That pattern is what slowly drives fatigue, cravings, abdominal fat gain, and rising fasting glucose. So the first rule of long-term stabilization is simple. Protect the curve. Keep vegetables and fiber at the beginning of the meal. Use apple cider vinegar strategically before heavier meals. And when a meal contains more carbohydrates than usual, do not panic. Use movement to absorb the load. These are small actions, but metabolically, they are powerful. They reduce the sharpness of glucose excursions, lower insulin demand, and create a much calmer internal environment. The goal is not perfection. The goal is fewer violent swings. Because every time glucose rises less aggressively, the pancreas works under less pressure. Every time insulin rises less dramatically, fat storage signals become weaker. And every time the curve becomes flatter, the next meal becomes easier to handle. This is how stability begins.
Principle 2. Muscle is metabolic wealth after 40. If this 7-day experiment revealed one clear biological truth, it is this. Muscle is one of the most powerful glucose-regulating organs in the human body. After 40, muscle loss is not just a cosmetic issue, it is a metabolic event. Less muscle means less storage space for glucose, less insulin sensitivity, and less resilience after meals. That is why rebuilding and preserving muscle becomes one of the most intelligent long-term strategies for anyone living with prediabetes or insulin resistance. The goal is not bodybuilding. The goal is metabolic protection. 2 to 3 resistance training sessions per week can begin to change the equation. Basic compound movements, body weight exercises, resistance bands, light dumbbells, squats, rows, presses, and carries, these are not just fitness tools, they are glucose disposal tools.
Principle 3. Control cortisol before it controls glucose.
One of the most overlooked reasons fasting glucose remains elevated is stress physiology. A person may reduce sugar, eat less, and still wake up with a higher than expected number. Why? Because the liver is listening not only to food, but also to hormones, and cortisol is one of the loudest hormones in that conversation. Chronic stress tells the body that survival comes first. In response, the liver releases more glucose into the bloodstream. This is useful in a real emergency, but when the emergency is email, deadlines, poor sleep, overwork, and constant mental activation, the result is a blood sugar system that behaves as if danger never ends. That is why stabilization requires stress management that is practical, not idealistic. A few minutes of slow breathing at the end of the day, less caffeine late in the afternoon, more distance between the final meal and bedtime, a calmer nervous system before sleep. These are not soft lifestyle extras. They are direct metabolic interventions. If cortisol stays high, fasting glucose often follows.
Principle 4. Sleep is the strongest metabolic prescription most people ignore. The body does not repair insulin sensitivity in meetings. It repairs it in sleep. Deep sleep is one of the most powerful biological states for restoring metabolic control. When sleep quality improves, insulin sensitivity often improves with it. Appetite regulation becomes more stable. Late-night cravings weaken.
Energy becomes more consistent. The nervous system becomes less reactive, and glucose control becomes less chaotic. This is why the final hours of the day matter so much. A lighter dinner, less screen exposure before bed, a darker room, a cooler sleeping environment, finishing food 2 to 3 hours before sleep. These choices may seem small, but they shape the hormonal conditions that determine what happens to glucose overnight. Many people think they have a food problem, when in reality, they have a recovery problem.
Principle 5. Aim for 80% consistency, not 100% perfection. Real life is not a laboratory. There will be restaurant meals, family gatherings, travel, fatigue, long workdays, and imperfect decisions. That is why the long-term goal cannot be flawless behavior. It has to be sustainable behavior. If 80% of your week sends the right metabolic signals, the body usually responds remarkably well. The system does not need obsession. It needs repetition. It needs enough good signals delivered often enough to create trust. That means most meals are structured well. Most nights protect sleep. Most days include some movement. Most weeks include resistance training. Not always, but often enough. This is the difference between a short burst of motivation and a genuine shift in physiology. The body changes when the pattern changes.
The real meaning of the 7-day reset. This was never just about one man, one glucose monitor, or 1 week of discipline. It was about exposing a deeper truth. Prediabetes is not always the final warning people think it is. In many cases, it is the last visible sign before a system becomes harder to recover. But if the signals change early enough, the trajectory can change too. That is what made this 7-day reset so powerful. It did not cure anything. It revealed responsiveness. It showed that even after 40, the body can still adapt quickly when the right levers are pulled. The lesson is not that the body is weak. The lesson is that the body is precise. And precision can be used in your favor. By the end of this journey, the man at the center of the story understood something millions of people still do not. His body was not betraying him. It was reporting back to him. It was reflecting years of stress, poor timing, low muscle activity, unstable sleep, and repeated glucose overload. Once the signals changed, the biology changed. That is the hope inside this story.
If you are over 40 and your energy is no longer stable, your waistline is harder to control, your cravings are getting louder, and your fasting glucose is drifting in the wrong direction, this is not something to ignore. But it is also not a reason to panic, because the difference between metabolic decline and metabolic recovery is often smaller than people think. Sometimes it begins with the first meal of the day, sometimes with a 10-minute walk, sometimes with better sleep, sometimes with finally understanding what your body has been trying to tell you for years. If this video helped you see prediabetes, insulin resistance, and blood sugar control in a new way, stay with us. Subscribe to DiaSync. Watch the next video in this series. And if you want, write the word reset in the comments so this channel can build more deep, evidence-based guides for people who want real metabolic clarity, not quick fixes. This is only the beginning. Your body can recover. Your numbers can change. And your next decade does not have to look like your last one.